In the middle of an intense argument, a quiet, almost invisible shift occurs in the human brain. Your heart rate spikes, your breathing shortens, and a primitive alarm bell rings deep within your amygdala. In that precise fraction of a second, you cease to be a rational human being operating on logic, strategy, and vision. You become a reactionary creature, operating entirely on survival instinct. The moment your temper flares, you hand the steering wheel of your mind directly to the person who poked you. You give them complete, effortless control over your choices, your reputation, and your outcome. Most people believe that the person who shouts the loudest, delivers the sharpest insult, or gets the last word wins the argument. But high-level human psychology reveals the exact opposite. Loudness is a confession of panic. Aggression is a confession of weakness. The person who loses their composure first has already lost the room, regardless of whether their facts are right or wrong. When you react with anger, you signal to everyone watching, including your opponent, that their words had enough power to breach your internal defenses, disrupt your peace, and breach your self-control. Dale Carnegie recognized that one of the most rare and formidable qualities in modern communication is the ability to maintain absolute, unshakable calm under direct verbal attack. Carnegie observed that human conflict is essentially an emotional game of catch. When someone throws a burning ball of anger, disrespect, or insult at you, your default biological impulse is to catch it instantly and hurl it back with double the force. But what happens if you simply refuse to catch it? What happens if you let their rage drop uselessly onto the floor between you? The answer is profound. The entire dynamic collapses. The person attacking you relies entirely on your friction to sustain their rage. Their emotional explosion requires fuel, and that fuel is your defensiveness, your raised voice, and your frantic attempt to counter their points. The moment you offer zero friction, the moment you meet their wild, frantic energy with dead-still, unbothered composure, their momentum dies instantly. They are left standing alone in the arena, swinging wildly at thin air, exposing their own insecurity to everyone in the room. Lumbins. Imagine walking into any high-stakes interaction, a heated confrontation with a difficult colleague, a volatile personal argument, or a public attempt to humiliate you, and feeling absolutely zero surge of panic. You are not suppressing your feelings through sheer willpower, nor are you swallowing your anger in passive defeat. Instead, you possess a deep psychological framework that renders emotional attacks completely harmless. You see the angry outburst for what it truly is, not a threat to your dignity, but a temporary psychological breakdown occurring in the person standing across from you. When you view human conflict through this lens, your entire posture changes. You stop reacting to the noise and start analyzing the signal. You realize that when an adversary loses their temper, they are revealing their most vulnerable pain points, their hidden insecurities, and their desperation for control. Your calm does not mean you're weak. It means you're in complete command of the environment. You are the immovable rock against which their frantic waves smash and dissolve into foam. Mastering this art of unshakable calm is not merely a social trick. It is the absolute foundation of social authority. It allows you to navigate the most hostile rooms, de-escalate explosive situations, and exert a quiet, undeniable dominance without raising your voice. As we step deeper into this psychological playbook, you will discover the exact internal switches to flip for the moment pressure builds, turning potential disasters into flawless displays of emotional mastery. The person who loses their composure first has already lost the room, regardless of whether their facts are right or wrong. To cultivate an unshakable inner composure when pressure mounts, you must first master the physiological circuit breaker, controlling the physical response long before the emotional explosion takes over. Emotional volatility is not an abstract event happening only in your thoughts. It is a full-body biological cascade. The moment you perceive an attack, your nervous system floods your bloodstream with adrenaline, tightening your muscles, shallowing your breath, and raising the pitch of your voice. If you do not interrupt this physical cascade within the first 3 seconds, your body will hijack your mind, making rational thought nearly impossible. Jen, this is where the tactical pause becomes your greatest superpower. When an opponent throws a biting insult, a sarcastic remark, or a fierce accusation, the average person feels an overwhelming compulsion to respond immediately. They fill the silence with rapid excuses, sharp retorts, or defensive counterattacks. But the master of emotional control does something completely unexpected. They choose absolute silence for 2 to 3 deliberate seconds. They freeze the frame. They slow down time. During those few seconds of silence, you accomplish 3 critical psychological objectives. First, you interrupt your own nervous system's fight or flight reflex, giving your prefrontal cortex time to process the information rationally rather than reactively. Second, you deprive your opponent of the instant reaction they were desperately baiting you for, leaving their aggression hanging awkwardly in the air. Third, you project immense, high-status confidence. Only a person who feels threatened rushes to speak. A person who is completely secure in their standing takes their time, breathes calmly, and measures their response with total precision. Dale Carnegie consistently emphasized that the most effective way to disarm an explosive situation is to change the tempo of the conversation. Chances caution when the person across from you is speaking rapidly, loudly, and with intense emotional heat, you must consciously lower the volume of your voice and drop your speech tempo by half. You do not match their energy, you force them to match yours. By lowering your tone to a calm, steady, measured register, you act as an acoustic anchor for the room. You make it physically uncomfortable for them to continue screaming at someone who is speaking with cool, deliberate clarity. Consider how this looks in practice. Imagine a heated meeting where an aggressive colleague points a finger at you and shouts, "This entire project is failing because you didn't double-check those numbers." Instead of raising your voice to defend yourself or pointing a finger back, you take a slow, deep breath. You hold steady eye contact for 2 full seconds. Then, speaking in a calm, lowered, unhurried voice, you say, "Let's look at those numbers together right now, so we can identify the exact discrepancy and fix it." Look at what just happened. You didn't apologize, nor did you shrink back, but you completely refused to enter the emotional cage match they set up for you. You bypassed the emotional bait, stripped the drama away from the room, and reframed a chaotic attack into a cold, practical problem-solving exercise. You made yourself look like the only adult in the room while making their outburst look reckless, unprofessional, and out of control. This ability to stay cold under fire is not about suppressing your emotions. It is about directing that raw energy towards strategic dominance. You realize that an argument is never won by proving who can get more upset. It is won by the person who can keep their mind. crystal clear, while everyone else around them is losing theirs. But to master this skill on a permanent instinctual level, you must learn how to reframe direct disrespect in a way that deprives the attacker of their emotional satisfaction entirely. Only a person who feels threatened rushes to speak. A person secure in their standing measures their response with total precision. The second core mechanism of maintaining unshakable calm under fire requires a profound shift in how you process direct disrespect, the art of emotional detachment. Most people react with explosive anger during an argument because they take the attack personally. They interpret the insult, the tone, or the harsh judgment as an accurate assessment of their worth, which instantly activates their ego to defend itself. But when you understand the deeper psychological reality of human hostility, you realize a liberating truth. An emotional attack is almost never about you. It is a raw, unfiltered confession of the other person's internal distress. When someone loses their temper, resort to cheap insults, or attacks your character, they are not demonstrating power. They are broadcasting an inability to manage their own emotions. They are reacting to their own deep-seated fears of losing control, feeling inadequate, or being exposed. Dale Carnegie understood that when you view a hostile adversary through the lens of pity rather than offense, your entire emotional state changes. You stop feeling threatened and start feeling observant. You become like a seasoned physician watching a patient throw a temporary feverish tantrum. You don't take the patient's fever personally, nor do you get angry at the illness. You simply diagnose it. Imagine how much power you possess when an opponent tries to wound your pride, and instead of taking the bait, you mentally step outside the room and analyze their strategy. You observe their flaring nostrils, their elevated voice, and their shaky logic not as threats to your identity, but as fascinating data points, revealing their underlying panic. By detaching your self-worth from their opinion, you render their weapons completely useless against you. They are throwing darts at a ghost. Their words carry only as much weight as you choose to assign to them, and you choose to assign them 0. Dear, this psychological detachment allows you to deploy one of the most lethal tools in de-escalation, the agreement frame. When someone launches a bitter critique against you, their brain is wired to expect immediate counter-argument. If they say, "You are being completely unreasonable," they expect you to yell back, "No, I'm not, you are." But when you use Carnegie diplomacy, you agree with the truth hidden inside their emotion, or you validate their right to feel that way without actually accepting their insult. Bland. Instead of fighting their statement, you lean into it with calm curiosity. You reply, "You know what? I can completely see why it looks that way from your perspective, or if I were looking at this situation purely from your angle, I might feel the exact same frustration." Notice what happens in that moment. You haven't admitted fault, nor have you compromised your position, but you have completely destroyed their psychological leverage. You cannot fight someone who agrees with your right to be heard. You cannot continue screaming at a wall that simply absorbs your energy and reflects back calm, objective understanding. Bland. When you validate their emotional state without absorbing their toxicity, the hostility drains out of the interaction like water from a broken dam. Their nervous system realizes that the war they prepared for is not happening. The adrenaline begins to fade, their guard drops, and they are forced to step out of their primitive brain and back into their logical prefrontal cortex. You have successfully guided them out of a chaotic street fight and onto a chessboard where your cold, calculated clarity reigns supreme. Mastering this mental buffer guarantees that no one can ever push your buttons without your explicit permission. You become the absolute ruler of your own emotional state, completely immune to provocation, baiting, or manipulation. But to turn this defensive shield into an offensive strategy for absolute influence, you must learn how to reframe the conversation entirely, steering the energy from emotional conflict toward constructive victory. An emotional attack is almost never about you. It is a raw, unfiltered confession of the attacker's internal distress. Once you have neutralized their emotional wave and maintained your cold, steady composure, the next critical phase is taking command of the conversation structure. An argument is essentially an emotional tug of war. As long as you pull back against their line, the tension remains high and the conflict continues to burn. But the moment you drop your end of the rope and begin asking targeted, non-defensive questions, you instantly reverse the direction of the power. You shift from defending your position to quietly inspecting theirs. Dale Carnegie knew that telling people they are wrong triggers instant defensiveness, but asking them targeted questions forces them to confront their own logic. When someone is driven by anger, their arguments are almost always built on shaky assumptions, emotional exaggerations, and unexamined biases. If you attack their assumptions head-on, they will fight to the death to protect their ego. But if you calmly ask them to explain how their idea works or why they reached a specific conclusion, you force them to do the mental heavy lifting. They must pause, drop their hostility, and engage their logical mind to answer you. Consider the immense difference in psychological power between a defensive statement and a strategic question. If someone aggressively declares, "Your strategy is a total disaster and will cost us everything," a defensive response would be, "No, it isn't. You don't know what you're talking about." That reaction creates an instant clash of egos. Instead, imagine taking a quiet breath, maintaining soft, unblinking eye contact, and asking in a calm, curious tone, "Which specific part of the execution do you see failing first? Fard, and what alternative metric would you suggest we track instead?" Notice what you have accomplished with that single quiet question. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't insult them. You didn't defend your pride. Instead, you stripped away their emotional drama and demanded concrete facts. You backed them into a corner where they must either provide a well-reasoned, constructive answer or admit to themselves and everyone watching that their outburst was based on nothing more than raw emotional noise. You have transformed a hostile accusation into a structured consultation where you hold all the leverage. And furthermore, strategic questioning allows you to practice the ultimate Carnegie art, letting the other person save face. When people realize mid-argument that their position is flawed or their outburst was justified, they often double down simply because they are terrified of looking foolish. If you push them into a corner and demand an apology, their pride will force them to keep fighting long after they know they are wrong. A true master of human behavior never corners an opponent. They build them a golden bridge across which they can walk back with their dignity intact. Brains, you build this bridge by attributing their reaction to a noble intention or an understandable concern. You say things like, "I appreciate how passionately you care about the success of this project," or "It's clear your main focus here is protecting our team's time." By validating their underlying motive, even if their delivery was wildly inappropriate, you allowed them to step down from their aggressive ledge without feeling defeated. They don't have to confess to being out of control. They simply transition into being a passionate collaborator who is now working with you to find a solution. Land. When you control your tone, ask insightful questions, and protect the other person's self-respect, you become completely unassailable in any dispute. You transform arguments into productive dialogues and turn hostile instigators into cooperative partners. But to bring this entire discipline together into a lifelong instinctual superpower, you must master the final key, mastering your internal self-talk so that true peace becomes your permanent default state. A true master of human behavior never corners an opponent. They build them a golden bridge to walk back with their dignity intact. The ultimate supreme test of unshakable calm is not merely mastering what you say in the heat of battle, it is mastering what you say to yourself when the dust settles. Long after a confrontation has ended, the average person continues to refight the war in their own mind. They replay the insults, invent sharper comeback lines they wish they had delivered, and nurse a burning resentment that consumes their mental energy for hours, days, or even weeks. In doing so, they allow their opponent to win a secondary, quiet victory, occupying valuable psychological real estate, completely rent-free. Like Dale Carnegie spent decades teaching that true emotional resilience requires living in what he called day-tight compartments, closing the iron doors on past grievances and future anxieties, so that you can operate with total clarity in the present moment. Resentment, anger, and ruminating over past arguments do not punish the person who attacked you. They poison your own peace, cloud your judgment, and drain the energy you need to accomplish your highest goals. When you learn to let go of an argument the second it finishes, you achieve absolute freedom from external manipulation. Bent to build this permanent mental sanctuary, you must rewrite your internal dialogue around conflict entirely. Instead of viewing a confrontation as a personal violation or a threat to your standing, view it as an invaluable training ground for your personal character. Every difficult personality and every sudden outburst from an opponent is simply an opportunity to exercise your self-mastery. They are giving you a free lesson in emotional control. When you reframe every conflict as a test of your internal poise, rather than a threat to your ego, fear evaporates and is replaced by quiet, strategic curiosity. Please notice how this fundamental shift alters your entire aura over time. When people realize that nothing can shake your center, that insults bounce off you effortlessly, that chaos fails to rattle your breath, and that you refuse to be dragged into petty emotional brawls, your social status skyrockets. People naturally gravitate toward those who possess unshakable calm in times of storm. In boardrooms, in relationships, and in high-stakes social circles, the calmest voice is always the one that carries the most authority. While everyone else is reacting, screaming, and flailing, you stand as an anchor of reason, strength, and unwavering control. As you move forward into your daily life, carry this timeless Dale Carnegie wisdom with you. You cannot control how other human beings behave, nor can you prevent the world from flinging unexpected pressure in your direction. But you possess absolute divine authority over your own internal state. You are the ultimate master of your own reaction, the ruler of your own mind, and the guardian of your own peace. Lemons. When you choose unshakable calm, you stop fighting battles that do not serve your vision, and you begin winning the ultimate game of life. Not by destroying your opponents, but by mastering yourself so completely that no one can ever take away your peace again. In boardrooms, relationships, and high-stakes social circles, the calmest voice is always the one that carries the most authority